The council meeting of June 16th, 2020 is called to order. Whose turn is it to do the Pledge of Allegiance? Deidre? Okay. Oh, I didn't hear you. Oh, there you go. Okay.
All right. Everyone, please rise. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Thank you, Deidre.
My pleasure.
Donna, you want to do the roll call?
I sure do. Mayor Dorsey,
Here.
Deputy Mayor Peterson,
Here.
Councilmember Feast,
Here.
Councilmember Inesco,
Here.
Councilmember Bode,
Here.
Councilmember McDowell,
Present.
Councilmember Schmidt.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does council have any changes to the agenda? If not, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as published?
So moved. I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Motion carries. Move on to presentations. Finance Director Aaron B. Miller is going to give us an update on the 2020 budget.
Good evening, council members. Let me pull up this presentation here. Happy to be back with you tonight. Last week, or last meeting anyway, we looked at the 2019 year-end financial report. Today, what we're going to look at is our 2020 May financial update, particularly as it applies to COVID-19 and some of the things the city is responding to. I think you're probably very well versed in this now. We've been hammering it home, but there are really three major unknowns to the COVID-19 and its impact to the city. And the first one is how long the governor's stay home, stay safe order will last. And again, whether or not it comes back is also part of that. How deep will the impact to current year city revenues be? And how long until full economic recovery? Without knowing those three things, it makes it very difficult to try to forecast what we're up against. And so right now, we have very little data on the impact of the impact of the stay home, stay safe order from a revenue perspective. I'll remind the council that the sales tax revenue that we receive has a 2-month lag. So the May sales tax that the city received is collected in March by businesses. And the reason for the 2-month lag is the businesses collect the sales tax in March. They have until April 25th, I believe, to remit that to the state, and then the state remits the city share in March. So that makes it a little bit difficult because we're not up to date on what sales look like. Another issue or another unknown is the impact of the $600 weekly unemployment subsidy from the federal government, and especially the impact when that subsidy ceases. Right now, that $600 weekly subsidy is helping, and we don't know to what extent. We also don't know the lasting impacts of the pandemic on individuals' decision-making, on when they'll feel comfortable to shop at local retail shops, have meals at local restaurants, and so on and so forth. You know, we can't predict what the tastes and preferences of the people will be through this pandemic. We also really don't know the extent that national monetary or fiscal policy will have, what those decisions will have as an effect on cash flows. Monetary policy really talks about the management of interest rates and affecting the total supply of money in circulation. And as we'll see in a couple of slides, we're already at the 0 to 0.25%. So there's not a lot of room to go south from there. And again, there's been the CARES Act from a fiscal policy, which is trying to, which is a collective term for taxing and spending action of governments, and i.e. Stimulus plans. That's also been in effect. So how much will those impact moving forward? And at this point, we just simply don't have enough data points at all really to supply more than educated assumptions and certainly not absolutes as to what we're going to be looking at in the near future. I want to spend just a minute on national and state data points, looking at the national unemployment. We have the change in non-farm payrolls, and there's a note at the bottom, the summation of payroll jobs available within non-farm excludes some government workers, private households, proprietors, and nonprofit employees. And I just want to give a quick update on what those are. So when they say excludes government employees, really what they're talking about mostly are military employees, employees of the CIA, the NSA, and the Defense Intelligence Agencies, and those types of employees. The exclusion of private households, or really domestic household workers. Proprietors, those are the self-insured workers or self-employed workers that operate without a limited liability or partnership status. And then nonprofit workers, which is another big area. I don't know why they're excluded, but if you work for a 501c3, it's excluded from the non-farm payrolls. The reason we're looking at the non-farm payrolls is really that's just one of the major data points that people look at when it comes to unemployment. Down on the left-hand side of the chart, this is in thousands. So you can see that in April, the country, there was 20,687,000 less jobs in April than there was in March. We saw a little bump in May, an increase of about 2,500,000 jobs. But that's some of the excitement over that has been reduced by the first couple of weeks of June, which showed another loss of about 1,500,000. The April unemployment rate is the highest since the Great Depression, and that was estimated to be at about 25%. Right now, there are about 23.1 million people out of work. That excludes roughly 2.3 million that are called marginally attached to the labor force. And those are individuals that look for a job in the last 12 months, but not in the last 4 weeks. And it also excludes about 10.9 million working part-time due to reduced schedule because of unfavorable business conditions. There's also been in the news recently that the Bureau of Labor Statistics has come out and said that somewhere around the neighborhood about 4.9 million, there was about a 4.9 million counted as employed, which really should have been unemployed, which would change these numbers. The whole point behind this is just one of the data points that we're looking at, as we move forward, and we're going to pay close attention to what happens. The unemployment rate on the left-hand side, or the right-hand side, excuse me, of that chart gives you the month going back to October of 19 and the unemployment rate, and then the change from there. Again, really the same story. April of 2020 is the outlier there, showing there was about a 14.7 unemployment rate. Washington State unemployment, it's really the same news. We do not have May numbers, at least when we put this together, and the April figures are still preliminary, but as you would imagine, with the national unemployment changing in April dramatically, so did the states. Treasury yield curve, wanted to just spend a quick second on this. Gone are the days where you could actually get almost a percentage point of interest. What this shows is the Treasury yield curve at these data points, at these margins, beginning on the first Monday of January, the first Monday of March, and the first Monday of June. The top line being January, the middle line being March, and the bottom line being the June line. And you can see that the short-term interest rates, really looking at the first couple, 2-3 months, are way down from where they were. And even at the top end, the 30-year, we're just now crossing up onto about a 1.5%. So essentially what this is saying, if you want to invest in a bond that somebody is selling, you'd have to invest your money for 30 years to get a 1.5% return on that. The Fed rates and actions and probable actions. This is interesting, at least to me. On the left-hand side is the federal funds rate, and this is the interest rates for short-term interest. So you can see at the starting point, we were at about in the range of 2.25 to 2.5, and then going down, you see the different meeting dates. It got dropped in July to 2 to 2.5, in September to 1.75 to 2. Then again, it dropped in October, December, and January. It stayed where it was. They had a unscheduled meeting the 3rd of March. Again, this is COVID related, and they dropped it to 1 to 1.25, and then about 2 weeks later, they just took it all the way down to 0. You can see on the other two columns, those are the for and against. So those are the Fed chair or the Fed board members and how they voted. And you can see that it's been a 10 to 0 or a 9 to 1 vote to move those down. So that's pretty, that's a statement from the Fed board. Federal funds future probability table on the right-hand side, that is the probability table put together of where those that are asked believe the rate will be in the upcoming Fed meeting dates. So you can see those on the left-hand side. You can see that at least through March of 2021, they're not expecting any change, and they're not expecting any change by a lot, 99.3% to 0.7%. Interestingly, with that, the Federal Reserve themselves released a dot plot on the 10th of June. And at this point in time, so the chart you're looking at on the right is not the Fed. That is probability futures, people who look at what they believe will happen. The Fed Reserve themselves put together a dot plot, and they expect no change in rates until sometime in 2023. So that's a long time. The Fed chair also at this point has been, I don't know if forced is the right way, but has had to answer questions on perhaps moving to a negative interest moving forward. They've been, there's no plans to do that at this point in time, but that would certainly be an unprecedented step in the US. And it's just interesting that he's now having to field those types of questions. From a city perspective, our revenue assumptions on COVID impact, this is as of April 2020. And so as the council is well aware, we utilize a conservative approach to our budgeting where we estimate our revenues based on realistic, albeit conservative assumptions to provide reasonable assurance that actual revenues will be equal to or greater than budget, and expenditures then are budgeted to fit within those revenue estimates. So that's how we budget on an annual basis. What we looked at when we first started talking about COVID-19 and the impact to city revenues, again, we don't have a lot of data points at all on this. So we just, we wanted to be conservative. So we said, well, 7% reduction in property tax collections this year, 35% reduction in sales tax, 60% reduction in B&O tax, 20% reduction in utility taxes, 50% reduction in building and plan review collections, and then the 30% reduction in utility user charges. Overall, it's an impact to about 26% decrease in our general fund revenues and 30% in utility. I'll tell you now, we are not seeing this at this level yet. But again, when we talked on that first or second slide about the impacts, we just don't know what's going to happen moving forward. So until we get better data points, we're kind of leaving those assumptions alone. This slide here shows the impact of those assumptions. So the column on the second from the left, which is the budget number, then it shows the assumed impact, and then what the assumed collections would be. So it takes the property tax rate in this line of about 2.4, reduces it by 7%, and it comes to 2.26, and it's a reduction of about $170,000 on that line. Again, so we're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood, we're assuming somewhere in the neighborhood of about $2.1 million change in the general fund, and somewhere around about a $2.5, $2.6 million change in the utilities. Again, we're not there yet. We know these are conservative and we want to build around them, and only when we have better points do we want to really start making some adjustments to them. In response to this, we've developed our expenditure reduction targets. And I want to say, these targets are flexible, and it will depend on what we're seeing with revenues as we go through this. You can see the reduction targets on the chart on the left-hand side. Utility funds as enterprise entities, as well as our special revenue funds, what we're expecting them is we're expecting them to maintain balance between revenue and operations. So we've just said that our current assumption is a 30% reduction in user charges for our water, sewer, and storm. But we're not seeing that yet. The expectation is that if it's only a 5% reduction, the utility funds will be able to match that. If it's 25%, they'll find that match. If it's bigger than 30, they'll do that. But basically, because they run like businesses and they are enterprise, they just need to be able to adapt well to the revenues as they're coming in. We're looking for all funds to maintain their fund balance targets in 2020, and really that applies to the general fund and the street fund, which have a 16% fund balance target, and utility funds, which have 20% of current year expense budgets. We'll show a slide in just a minute about where we are in fund balance for all funds, and that we don't believe is going to be something that we need to worry about maintaining that level of fund balance. Revenue adjustments at this point in this slide, you'll see a revenue adjustment of $500,000. It's an increase in expected utility tax from solid waste user charges. When Waste Management took over our solid waste, they prepaid on utility tax of $1 million. And then as time went by, that slowly was reduced by the amount of utility tax that they had collected. When we budgeted, we were still, hadn't reached that $1 million mark. So we budgeted at the revenue rate that we expected to see based on 19 returns at the time and 18. But we did cross over that threshold later in 2019. And so our estimates are being moved up based on that. Also not included in this chart is $306,000 of CARES funding, which the city was allocated. We are expecting to use all of that money. So again, this does not show that. With that CARES money, what it would do, it would take our potential use of fund balance down from that $352,000 number to about $46,000. Again, assuming things continue on as we've made those assumptions. And we'll continually keep a close watch on revenue activity, and we're prepared to, you know, as I said, this is flexible. We're prepared to make adjustments as needed. So 2020 beginning fund balance by fund. Again, what we're looking at here is the general fund and street fund should be at 16% of current year adopted expenditures, and the utilities, the water, the sewer, and the storm drainage should be at 20%. And you can see we're well over that on all of those fronts, and you can see where we actually are on all of our fund balances. Fund balance is a place in the world, and for cash flow purposes and for planned investments at a future date. But we think the 16% and the 20% is a good number to shoot for there. So activity through May, really looking at the general fund here, through our expenditure categories of salary benefits, service charges, and the like. Our budget for 2020 in the general fund was $12.3 million. So far, year to date, we're at about $4.8 million, which is 39.2%. May is 42% of the year, so you can see we're right about where we should be, maybe a little bit under that 42%, but not too far out of line. The reason we wanted to bring this up is that, you know, if we are going to be having a revenue reduction, we are going to have to meet that with a expense reduction in some capacity. This chart is actually mistitled. This should actually just say tax comparison May year to date, because it has all of the general fund taxes in there. And we looked at this similar type of chart last meeting, looking at 2019 to 2018, and just looking to see what looks different. As you can see, this is really kind of, again, there's not a lot of differences in the chart. I would say the biggest one is you can see a large increase of utility tax in 2020 as compared to 2019. And that's kind of adjusted all the other taxes downward a little bit, because we're at this point in time, our year-to-date numbers, if you compare 2020 to 2019, are fairly comparable. Want to take a quick look at the regular sales tax by category. So I think we talked about this at one point or so, but when sales tax comes in, it is attributed to what's called a NAIC, North America Industry Code. And those codes, we've rolled them up and translate into these larger areas, whether it's a retail, wholesale, manufacturing, construction, food, and so on and so forth. So what we're looking at here is the sales tax collections. These are the month that we've received them. So again, there's a 2-month lag. So the January numbers are actually sales tax collected in November, but we received them in January. So we're showing this as a January sales tax. What we wanted to look at is going through the year is how things have changed between really the beginning of the year and May. And you can see that for the most part, there isn't a lot of swing. There are a few places here and there that have increased or decreased, but again, this is one of those things where we're looking at, you know, retail sales hasn't particularly dropped off through May. Again, May is the March sales, and March didn't, you know, the stay home, stay safe order didn't happen until the last week or so. But overarchingly, from the data points we have right now, this looks pretty consistent. We look at our delinquent utility accounts monthly as well. And so the chart on the bar chart on the left is the number of accounts that were delinquent by at least 1 month, by at least 1 month for each of these months. And you can see there was a spike in March, but all in all, you know, they're not real inconsistent. And then we also want to look at the outstanding amounts, and this is what you would expect to see, that 1 month delinquent right now is about $75,000, and we've broken that down whether it's a water or sewer delinquency or storm. When you look at 2 months, it comes down to about 21,000, and it goes down from there. So again, this is not really all that unusual from what we've seen in other months. This is where we're starting to see a little bit, and this is why we're not ready yet to relax on our revenue estimates. This is showing, the top part of this is showing our regular sales and use tax between 2018, 2019, and 2020. And you can see in April, which would be the February collections, and May, which would be the March collections, we're starting to tip down the other way. We're only about $37,000 less than we were at this time last year, but we're starting to see that those numbers being, 73,000 of that change happened in the last 2 months. And so we want to pay real close attention to this again. We'll get our sales tax numbers about the last the 29th or 30th of June. And that's going to probably shed a lot of light on where we are, because that will be a full month. That will be April, a full month of stay safe, stay home order. Same story with what we were looking at B&O tax. Now, B&O tax, similar to regular sales tax, monthly returns are due the 25th of the following month. So B&O tax that is collected in April is remitted in May. And so you can see our May number really dropped off. That would be a full month of April's stay safe, stay home order. So again, we're starting to see some things, and we don't want this to be the beginning of the trend, but we want to be realistic about what we are seeing out there right now. So really, I think the takeaways from this, again, we have little data points at this point in time on the impact of the stay home, stay safe order. We don't have enough data points to make certainly much more than educated assumptions at this time. The current revenue impact of assumptions are deliberately conservative. We are really hoping that our assumptions are the worst case scenario, and we're going to keep an eye on that to see where that goes. Overall, we've taken the appropriate steps, I think, to ensure that the city operations are able to continue, and the reduction decisions that have been made at this point in time have been made based on the council's strategic goals, as well as priority services for residents. And in the future that further expenditure reductions are necessary, we'll follow that same priority-based decision-making model. So with that, I'm gonna see if I can stop sharing here. There we go. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have them.
I think the one clarification I'd like to make is that the sales tax figures are a 2-month lag, but that the utility payments are accurate to that month. So there's a little bit of distinction there. So when we're thinking about this, it's kind of two different things to look at. So when you're looking at May numbers for utility accounts, that's the actual month. When you're looking at May numbers for sales tax, that's for actual March sales.
Well,
Just a thank you for making it I mean, it was really presented in a nice and easy to digest way. So
Thank you. Thank you.
it seems a little grim, and I want to see what happens at the end of June.
Yeah, it's going to be I think a telltale amount there of what we're
Yeah.
We should be getting a revenue forecast on the 27th, right, for the state?
Revenue forecast for the states on the 17th.
17th. So yeah, tomorrow. So we should hear tomorrow where the state sits in terms of its revenues. It'd be interesting to see how that aligns with local municipalities and things like that. But yeah, I'll echo the same thing. Aaron, again, really thorough and really easy to understand. So you probably aren't going to get very many questions because
yeah, perfect. Zero's the goal.
Okay, any other questions?
I just also think, not only looking at June, but I think the point of we have a lot of folks who are on that extended benefit right now, who are on unemployment insurance. And so it's going to be very interesting to actually see, I think, where we end up in September. for. It's going to be these next 3 months are going to be an interesting ride for everybody.
And we do have the supplemental budget that we'll be bringing to council. We are holding that until the second meeting in September. I believe that's September 15th, in order to make the most, make the budget adjustments that correspond with the data that we've received. So it's we can make the most accurate, we can create the most accurate budget based on what we're actually seeing. As Aaron mentioned a couple times, these are educated assumptions, but we don't have the data, so we want to make sure that we plan for the worst case scenario, but recognize that we need to be flexible and address the actual data as it comes in, and we'll do that in September.
Does the state break out the internet sales tax rather than the local sales tax? I'd be interested to see. I mean, go ahead.
We would love for them to do that, but they do not, unfortunately.
So, I'll tell you, our post office delivering mail or packages till 8 o'clock at night, like Christmas right now. So it'd be interesting to see how high the internet sales tax is.
And I've talked to, just on that note, I've talked to a few different people now that order online and have it shipped to their business instead of their homes in the county. So it helps a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay. Shall we move on? Right now, we're going to recess from the regular meeting and open a public hearing about WSDOT 6-year tip. City Engineer Ken Gill has details for us about a resolution for the 6-year tip.
You're muted, Ken.
Hear me?
Come on, Ken.
There he is.
Jeez.
I could hear him through the wall. I don't know.
Oh, thank you, Council, for letting me present to you tonight. I'm going to share my screen with you. A presentation. Okay, so the tonight's presentation is on the 6-year transportation improvement plan. And the reason why we need one is it gives an opportunity for council to review and discuss the projects. It gives us the ability to compete for state and federal grants. If a project's on this plan, just a kind of reminder, it doesn't guarantee that it's going to get funded or going to get completed. So, and also in your council briefing, Brooke Kiltz did a really good job of pointing out the RCWs, why we do it, and also that we submit this to WSDOT when we're all done with this public hearing and the next read that you'll have at your next council meeting. Ooh, so the top 3 that are projects that are in the plan, I wanted to briefly talk about the first one tonight, but those are the top 3, and then they're numbered sequentially on the left side. In your packet, you have so it looks like 11.5 by 17, where it describes the project name, project limits, gives a description, estimated cost, what kind of improvement it is, and there's a little cheat sheet definition of the codes that WSDOT has city uses that Brooke added to the packet. And then if you flip it over on the other side, it kind of details out when it's going to get built by the year, and all those are estimates. But really the top 3 that I've spent most time on since I've been here is Railroad Avenue, and that's from 7th Street to Pacific Court to city limits. And then the 2 roundabouts that we've got planned, one by the YMCA at Shelton Springs and Wallace Neyland, and then the other one at North 13th and Wallace Neyland. So tonight I'll give you a little briefing, some pictures about West Railroad Avenue that's looking east, but right now it's a 2-lane road with some cracks in it. Our project will add a sidewalk on the south side so that you could walk from Pacific Court, including any of those businesses, to go to the elementary school, Safeway, to downtown. The project adds a bus pullout and a shelter right there at Pacific Court. Right now, if you walked it today, you'd be walking on tracks and tried to avoid that old collapsed pipeline that's there left over from the pulp mill days, and avoiding the Christmas trees that are growing up through the tracks today. You can see where the project repaves the road, adds a sidewalk and new road approaches for those residents that front Railroad Avenue. This is a little closer to downtown, but the thing that jumps out at me from the existing conditions is there's no sidewalk on either side. The project adds a center turn lane, street parking, bike lane, and sidewalks, most importantly, on both sides of the road. This is existing conditions. You can see why it's called Railroad Avenue. It kind of bisects it at a skew. And then this is our downtown concept of what it will look like when it's done. Really, this was driven a lot by collaboration with our downtown visioning group. And this was generated from the visioning study that was done prior to my employment, but was a lot of good staff outreach effort to our downtown's businesses and other people that are affected by this project. This is a picture out of that corridor study that kind of shows you what it looks like when it gets all done. It has the railroad tracks eventually getting turned into a rail trail. That's not with this project, but then some travel lanes and some sidewalks. So kind of the next steps are, today we're doing a public hearing, having a first reading, and then on your next agenda, you'll have get actioned. The other person that I wanted to give a shout out to is Cobra Schneidmiller, but she put together the map in your council packet that shows the lines where all the projects are at. So she did a good job on that. So with that, that's my presentation. Do any of you have any questions or any input on anything that I presented tonight?
The purpose of the city's transportation improvement plan, correct me if I'm wrong, that basically gets rolled up into the overall statewide transportation improvement plan. And part of that is when there's a call for federal funds and the ultimate divvying out of Fed dollars as well as other transportation dollars. Basically, essentially, I guess, we have to have the projects laid out on this plan in order to be eligible for those funds when those funds drop, correct?
Correct. Usually in a funding application, you want to be able to answer the question that asks, is this project in any plan? Has it been through any public process? And if you're unable to answer yes to that question, you're not going to get many points. So you're probably not going to get it funded.
Yeah, and I've just been thinking in the back of my mind, the potentials for infrastructure projects as part of a economic stimulus, and making sure that I know I agree with what's been presented thus far as being things that are of a great need for the community, but I'm curious too that the other council members, if we do get an opportunity for funding, are these projects sort of our top 10 list of things that we want to get done? I think we're all pretty much in agreement there. So I'm glad that this is formalized and we're prepared to kind of, take action if and when potentially funding arrives for these items.
Okay. Now, before we place this on the agenda for next week, is there any public comment on this, Donna?
I think we need to wait about 30 seconds for the live
Okay.
to see if we get anything. So let me look at my watch. Okay, I'm timing us for 30 seconds.
Should we come off screen share there?
Yeah, Ken, if you could take it off screen sharing, that'd be great.
Okay, Mr. Mayor.
All right.
I haven't
Oh.
received any emails or phone calls.
Okay. So council concur to place this on the July 7th agenda?
Yes.
Okay. At this time, we'll close the public hearing and reopen. Move on to our action agenda. The first item on the action agenda tonight is an ordinance for the Parks, Recreation, Open Space, and Trails Plan. Community Development Director Mark Ziegler is going to share information with us.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. I appreciate the opportunity to bring this back to you tonight for action. I'm going to go to a share screen here with the PowerPoint that we had previously on February 4th.
That was a while ago.
Yeah, exactly. So this is a project that started early 2019. Again, we brought it to the council for approval on February, or first reading, I guess, of the ordinance on February 4th. And this is what I like to call the roadmap for the city of Shelton for our parks and recreation, trails, and open space throughout our community. A number of elements included in the plan, including the existing facilities, inventory, strong public involvement, our goals and objectives, demand and needs analysis, action program, funding sources, and then our funding strategy and our capital improvement plan. The Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee worked hard to establish a mission and vision. We inventoried our existing facilities, as you see here, community parks, neighborhood parks, urban parks, trails, and open space, then undeveloped properties that might serve as parks in our community. And the real foundation of this plan is the public involvement. We kicked it off on the Spotlight Shelton back in May of 19. We have our Citizens Advisory Committee that works hard, meeting monthly and in between to vet the plan moving forward and all facets of that plan. We had something different that I haven't been involved with before, but a virtual workshop that the members of our community could actually get on their smartphones or their computer, drop a pin where they'd like to see an opportunity, where they would like to see a trail developed or a park enhanced, or maybe just increased maintenance in one of our facilities. And we got a lot of great feedback through that. And then we had kind of a traditional survey that was done online as well, where we garnered the information based on questions that were asked. As you can see, nature trails, water access, open space, those are really at the top of our list. And that's really rung true for, boy, in my time here, at least 20 years. Our goals and objectives, I addressed a number of elements throughout the operations of Parks and Recreation, really including how we function on a daily basis and our goals that we want to meet, from maintenance to development to operation, and then all the elements within the plan, whether it's water access or neighborhood parks, open space, cultural facilities, all those elements have goals and objectives for us to meet and obtain and continue moving forward. The demand and needs analysis was developed using national and state guidelines. We use peer cities, other city plans. Ken Gill mentioned the downtown visioning plan that was taken into account, as well as other plans. And then utilizing some metrics like service radiuses for neighborhood parks of a half-mile service radius are the intent of this plan. And the goal is to provide a neighborhood park within a half-mile radius from where everybody lives in this community. So they're within walking distance and they can access those quite easily. And then have community parks that are larger parks that serve the broader community, have more enhanced, robust facilities maybe than what a neighborhood park would. This map shows a heat map of where our facilities are. You'll see kind of the orange are the quarter-mile service areas, yellow or half-mile service areas, and moves out from there. So it really shows some of the gaps that we have in the community that aren't in color. They're still in gray within the city limits, as well as the UGA. As the city expands, we need to start looking into those areas and how we provide services outside of the city limits as well, moving forward. A snapshot of the demand and needs analysis. We're doing fairly well as far as parkland. Right now, the emphasis really is on our existing facilities, but as we move forward, as the city grows, we really saw that open space was an interest of in our community. Those can provide those nature trails, bicycle trails, things like that, that people were really expressing interest in throughout the public engagement. Our action plan develops a methodology and approach through 3 levels, how we're going to achieve these goals and how we vet projects moving forward. And you'll see the priority of projects and actions below that, addressing facility maintenance, renovation replacement, how we plan trails and corridors, and enhancing support facilities that might be in some of our existing facilities. And then obviously we address funding. The Parks Department is funded through the Shelton Metropolitan Park District through property taxes. There's other avenues to help achieve some of the goals in this plan. And my next item on the agenda tonight, we'll talk a little bit about that and a property acquisition. But this plan, with its adoption, makes us eligible for these grant funding opportunities. And so at the time when the council takes action, we'll forward this plan off to the Recreation and Conservation Office of the state of Washington to gain eligibility for further application of grant funding within their funding categories. There's no financial impact at this point. There is a capital improvement plan, but again, those projects will come forward in the annual budget review each year to the council. And I'm open to any questions that you might have.
Mark, if I may, I just had one comment, is that early on in this process, we made a valiant effort to have community residents heard about what was important to them and what they valued in their park systems. And I know we talked a lot about the opportunity to interact online and fulfill surveys, but correct me if I'm wrong, you also provided opportunities if folks wanted to visit or call in or submit written comments, because we recognize that not everyone is necessarily online, that we did have other avenues for our residents to provide feedback as this plan was being developed. Can you speak to that?
Correct, yeah, we provided, I'll get out of share screen here maybe, if I can figure it out. Yeah, we actually received some written comments through the survey. We advertised that through our social media and website and local press, that those opportunities were out there. If you were not able to participate electronically, we took comments at the Spotlight Shelton event and then met with people across the counter and actually filled out surveys for them, or just provided comments and included those within all the electronic survey responses that we received.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Jeff, at this time, should we pause for a public comment? Or Donna? You're muted.
Yes, I'm ready to do
Yeah,
Okay.
seconds.
for 30 seconds, and Donna can keep time for us, and we can watch Mark try to figure out how to get out of the share.
There we go.
He did it. Okay, I'm timing us 30 seconds.
I had to fill it somehow.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, that's 30 seconds.
All right. I'll ask for a second reading of the ordinance number 1948-0120.
Ordinance number 1948-0120, an ordinance of the City of Shelton, Washington, adopting the 2020 Parks, Recreation, Open Space, and Trails Plan.
All right, do we have a motion?
I move to adopt ordinance number 1948-0120, adopting the 2020 City of Shelton Parks, Recreation, Open Space, and Trails Plan. There we go.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any more questions?
Well done.
Yes.
All right. We have a motion and a second to adopt ordinance number 1948-0120, adopting the 2020 City of Shelton Parks, Recreation, Open Space, and Trails Plan. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. All right, one more item for Mark, resolution authorizing the RCO grant application.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. As I mentioned previously, the staff has been working on a grant application with the Recreation and Conservation Office for the acquisition of 7.28 acres adjacent to Neeland Park. Interestingly enough, this acquisition has been listed in Parks Plan since 1989. And so it's been identified in park plans from that date moving forward, before my time even. So that's pushing it back a bit. What this authorizing resolution does is just identify to the RCO that the City Council has given authority to move forward with the application. It doesn't agree to the grant necessarily. That would come at a later date. But this is a process they ask for with all of their grant applications. We have an agreement, or at least an authorization from the property owner that they're willing to sell the property to the city with. So hopefully, with luck, we have the opportunity to receive the RCO grant and move forward here. Probably in November is the timeline. We'll go through a technical review next week, another presentation in August, and should hear by the end of September how the ranking of the projects take place. And then we'll bring it back to the council if we're lucky enough to rank in the eligible projects for funding.
All right, should we pause for 30 seconds again for public comment?
Yes, Mr.
Okay.
Mayor, and Donna can time for us.
Here we go.
I want Jeopardy music next time.
That's what Tim's humming over here beside me.
Was he?
Yes, he was. Hey, Mr.
You
Mayor.
probably can't afford to use
We
their
have to sing
tune.
it
We'd
to
have to
ourselves.
change it a little bit, right?
Yeah.
It's time, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Donna. So do we have a motion? No, we have to have first reading? First reading?
Yes.
Yes.
Are you ready? It's a really long one. Where's that Mark Ziegler? Look at this title. Resolution number 1158-0520. Resolution of the City Council of the City of Shelton, Washington, that number 1, authorizes the submission of application for grant funding assistance through the Recreation and Conservation Office to assist with land acquisition for Neeland Park expansion, project number 20-1705A. And number 2, identifies the Community Development Director and Mayor or their designees as the city's authorized representatives for purposes of securing the grants and binding the city to the grant's terms and conditions.
All right, thank you, Donna.
You're welcome.
Do we have a motion?
I
I
move to
move,
adopt.
go ahead.
Go ahead, Eric.
No, you go right ahead.
I move to adopt resolution number 1158-0520 to, one, authorize the submission of application for grant funding assistance through the Recreation Conservation Office to assist with land acquisition for Neyland Park expansion, project number 20-1705A, and two, identify the community development director and city manager or their designees as the city's authorized representatives for purposes of securing the grants and binding the city to the grants, terms, and leases conditions.
Take a breath. Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any council members have any more questions about this for Mark? All right, we have a motion and a second to adopt resolution number 1158-0520 to, one, authorize the submission of application for grant funding assistance through the Recreation and Conservation Office to assist with land acquisition for Neyland Park expansion, project number 20-1705A. And number two, identify the community development director and city manager or their designees as the city's authorized representatives for purposes of securing the grants and binding the city to the grants, terms, and conditions. All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.
Pretty sure that was I think that was our longest motion.
That was a long one. Yeah.
That was a long one. All right. Good
You
work.
guys probably got tired of hearing from me, I'm sure.
That's why I just sat here and smiled. Let you all read.
The last item on the action agenda this evening is an update of two city policies. City Manager Jeff Knighton has the details for us.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, members of council, and members of the public who might be watching. We did bring these two policies to you back in February, very similar to the Parks, Recreation, Open Space, and Trail Plan. As you know, we are in the process of updating almost all city policies, and we're reviewing that now, and we'll have that done by the end of the year. These two policies in particular were important to update a little bit earlier than the rest, because we have an opportunity to receive a grant from the Secretary of State's office as it relates to our records management policy and our disclosure of public records. We wrote these and submitted the grant. The grant won't be announced. The grant awards won't be announced until July 1st. But the Secretary of State's office has asked if they could use our draft policies as models for other communities throughout the state. I do feel pretty comfortable with the grant process, and I want to particularly thank Donna Nault, who put in a lot of effort on this, but also Carrie Holloway, who put in a tremendous amount of effort in this and worked with the Secretary of State's office. If we are awarded the grant, all credit should go to those two. And I'm love to hear when the things that we do are looked at as models for other communities in our state. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. If not, then we can move forward and take the money and get modernized.
Very good.
Well, while we're thinking of questions, if anybody has any, we should probably do a 30-second pause again for public comment.
Okay, let's see. Okay, I'm timing us. Okay, Mr. Mayor, it's been 30 seconds.
All right. Do we have a motion?
I'll read the short one. How's that? Thanks.
There you go.
I move to approve city policy number 100-05 concerning records management and city policy number 100-12 concerning disclosure of public records.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion from the council? All right, hearing none, we have a motion. Oh,
Kudos, everyone. It's a really
oh
good.
yeah,
Yeah, it's a big
definitely.
getting this done. So thank you very much.
Thank you for working on that, Donna, and tell Carrie that.
I will do so.
We have a motion and a second to approve city policy number 100-05 concerning records management and city policy number 100-12 concerning disclosure of public records. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Move on to administration reports. Jeff, will you give us your city manager report, please?
I will, Mr. Mayor, and I'm going to turn this over to Chief Moody. The only thing I wanted to mention tonight is the high school car parade for our graduates this year. I thought that went incredibly well. And it was fun seeing all the cars decorated, the pictures. Several of our employees went out and cheered as they went by, and I'm sure several of the council members did too. I personally wasn't able to make it, but I did enjoy the pictures that I've seen, and everybody has said it went off without a hitch, and I thought that was fantastic.
It was real nice.
And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Chief Moody.
Thank you, Jeff. Good evening, council members and general public. First of all, I'd like to start off by saying thank you to the council for their support of the police department over the years. And your support is echoed throughout the community. I can't tell you how many times in the last few weeks we've had people coming in here wanting to give us gifts, wanting to give us support. It's been overwhelming. We are truly blessed in this community to have that kind of community support around law enforcement and public safety. Recently, a project by Campaign Zero was sent out to a lot of municipalities called 8 Can't Wait, and it addressed policies that it suggested would eliminate or greatly reduce violence through law enforcement contacts with the public. And Jeff and I thought this would be a good time to give you and the public some information on what's going on in Shelton specific and what we're doing here. We put measures in place within the last 5 years that address many of the issues that are currently being discussed throughout the nation. We will commit to current relevant training and education for our staff and commit to being members of the community, not just law enforcement. And I think we've proven that many times. As listed in our annual report, we made over 14,000 calls for service, which, if you totaled everything, about 20,000 contacts with the public. And that it resulted in use of force 0.003% of the time. And use of force with us is a very large umbrella. It can be anything non-compliant. So it's as simple as if somebody refuses to put their hand behind their back and we have to forcefully pull a hand behind back, that's a reportable use of force in our policy. We implemented body-worn cameras 4 years ago. Those have proven extremely valuable for all of us within the police department. We update our old policies with existing policies with current best practices, aligning with case law and training to go with those policies and ensure how to know how to use them. Officers get what's called daily training bulletins here to go with their Lexipol policy. In other words, every time a new policy comes out, they're tested on it, they have to take a quiz on it, they get readings on it, and every month new daily training bulletins come up over old policies, so they must go back again and listen to it, quiz on it, and pass it. And that's all documented. We received WASPIC accreditation in 2019, which is a pretty big accomplishment. It included outside auditing of reporting, training, and use of force, where outside auditors came in and basically probed our entire department and said we are using best practices. Continuing training has gone on regarding implicit bias, how to interact with underrepresented community members, de-escalation, using many types of education, including scenario-based training that aligns with our current policies and laws. So it's not just throwing out the policies and here's a piece of paper, read it. We're using scenario-based training, video training, anything we can use to get that across. I think a recent example of what the trust has done in our community was a recent downtown march. There was 2 different groups of differing viewpoints. and they were for the most part respectful of each other's rights. And both groups contacted us ahead of time as a police department, said this is what we want to do. And like I said, for the most part, they were very respectable, and it was nice to get the contacts after saying thank you very much for all your support. Our policy prohibits the use of any pain compliance technique unless the officer has been specifically trained and or certified in that use of force. We do not train in the use of the carotid or LVNR technique. This would include the commonly misused terms that are going around now of choke or strangleholds. All officers have been through and continue to receive updated training regarding de-escalation, including scenario-based, such as the live action training with the force option simulator. Some of you remember from a few years ago that we invited the council to come down. We invited the media to be involved in. Some will call it a shoot, don't shoot scenario. It's a force option simulator. Our firearms training incorporates giving warnings anytime we use our taser or firearm, if at all possible. So if you're ever out at our range during training days, excuse me, you're going to hear a loud yelling over most of what's going on out there. And that is every time that gun comes out, they are giving verbal warnings and instructions. That's incorporated in all of our training. We do exhaust all alternatives, as mentioned in the thing earlier. It's called de-escalation. Our officers are trained in every tool they have, including verbal techniques. But to just blanketly say exhaust all alternatives in every circumstances would put us all at risk if we use certain scenarios. We do have policies in place that could make it mandatory to intervene, even if the potential is there. It talks about even leading up to the incident. And we are already taking care of those. Shelton policies have prohibited shooting at moving vehicles unless the vehicle is an imminent deadly threat since 2015. The use of force continuum that they mentioned in the report is an example of exhaust all alternatives in our opinion, and it's not been around since 1990s. The use of force continuum is strictly about force escalation, and it can cause actually more force issues than it can prevent. Instead of having the officers look at the big picture of how to solve a problem, all the use of force continuum did in the 90s was say, go to the next level, go to the next level, go to the next level, instead of what can we do to resolve the problem. We not only require all use of force incidents to be documented thoroughly, these reports go through all supervision levels, including the chief. We also have a review panel to discuss the use of force during the incident. We are also audited through WASPIC accreditation. And furthermore, we address the use of force in our annual report. And our practices and policies are in line with the RCW definition of necessary force, which means that no reasonably effective alternative to the use of force exists, and that the amount of force used was reasonable to effect the lawful purpose intended. As you can see, we've incorporated these topics in our current training practices and policies several years ago. We are ahead of that. We will continue to review and adopt changes in the policing, and legislative continue to adapt modern policing. If you'd like any questions answered, I'm here to answer any questions you may have. I didn't get the memo that we had to put a PowerPoint on, so I'm the only one who didn't do the presentation by PowerPoint today.
I didn't either.
I would like to thank you for that, for not another PowerPoint.
I will second that. Thank you.
So all the council members, myself and Chief Moody got the email from 8 Can't Wait. And we wanted to make sure that the council knew that we had addressed those issues. And Chief Moody addressed those issues, or a lot of those items, not issues, items, I should say, before I was here, and because it's the right way to do. And our police department is incredibly professional, and I have the utmost confidence in all of them, and that's a tribute directly to Chief Moody. He runs an extremely professional department.
And I would just agreed. And I'd also like to just echo as well, while we're addressing this issue, this isn't the end. This is a continuing process, and I firmly believe that with the leadership that we have from the chief on down, as well as other community organizations and our partner agencies, that as the need dictates, being able to be flexible and being able to change the way we do business to do that better and more equitably and to be doing things more appropriately for our community. I think I have no concerns that we won't be able to do that moving forward. And again, appreciate what our first responders deal with on a daily basis. And I would like to think as well, one of the things that makes Shelton and Mason County quite successful on this front is the fact that we're pretty in tune with our community here. I'm not going to be naive and say it's perfectly figured out, but I think a lot of times, sometimes being a small town is a benefit for law enforcement, as well as we get to know people and we get to know their situations and can assist before we're resulting in, use of force situations and things like that. So I'm appreciative of the calm, cool, collected manner that things get dealt with. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
I'd also
Joe.
like to add, I understand when the 8 Can't Wait came out, what they're trying to accomplish here. But I just wanted the council to be aware that we were already on those, and we've been on them for several years, and moving forward with it. And, I also want to thank Jeff, because we had a chance to reorganize the police department a little bit in the last few months. And with that, we've added an entirely another level of supervision into that. We have not only police sergeants on patrol on the street, but we also have 7 days a week coverage of a police lieutenant on the street on patrol instead of sitting in the office, which adds a whole nother layer of supervision to everything we're doing here.
Yeah, I also appreciate being able to adapt and change, as Joe was saying, but change more, improve. And we all have room for improvement. So I really appreciate the job you're doing.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's one of the things we're trying to do across the whole organization, is instill a culture of continuous improvement. There's nothing that we do so well that can't be improved on, and we're consistently looking for those opportunities.
But I would be remiss without one last plug, which is the training, the recurrent training, the tools, Lexipol, watching Gordon Graham, spew the information each day. That's not free. These tools do come at a cost, and again, seeing the things we see, we cannot necessarily cut back, but we need to make sure that the financial situation that we're setting ourselves up for can continue to grow and to continue to support these necessary things, and especially in the first responder community, but across all state or city government aspects. And again, there's an expense to this, and we need to make sure that we right size those budgets, the revenues and things like that go towards this, so we can continue to be cutting edge and doing things the way we need to be doing things.
I would add, when I received that email, I had the opportunity to ask some questions, to find out where we were. And I'm so proud of you, Chief Moody, and our police department and our city and our community, that we are cutting edge and that we are out in front of this and we're thinking about this. Really appreciate your leadership, and really appreciate how you're organizing your team and how you're creating mentorship within your supervision and all of that too. It's so important. So appreciate it.
I think that's the first time Shelton's ever been referred to as cutting edge.
Hey.
We had a technology meeting today, and I don't think that was used. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Doesn't always relate to technology. Sometimes being cutting edge is just having this work for you in the right ways, and you can buy the hundreds of thousands of dollars of technical gizmos and gadgets, but if you don't have the right person to operate it all, it doesn't matter. And I think we've got strong people to do that. So
thank you.
The last thing I wanted to say, Mr. Mayor and Deputy Mayor and council members, is hopefully, fingers crossed, this is our last Zoom meeting. So
Oh, yeah.
the plan, I hope. So the plan at the moment is to have our next council meeting be in person. We will be in the larger room and not in the regular council chamber so that we can maintain physical distancing and all the other requirements. But hopefully we'll be able to sit down in person again. And that, I know Mason County is applying for a variance to move to phase 3. I saw it in the newspaper late last week, that the hopeful date is June 22nd. I think we're all hoping for that. And that's all I have.
Jeff, can I add one thing, please?
Sure.
It was on the end of my speech, and I forgot to even say it, that how proud I am of the men and women at the police department. And if you see one, say thanks.
Yep.
Yeah, you bet. I was talking to Chris today. What a good job he's been doing.
I had some folks up in my neighborhood a couple weeks ago and super proud of how they handled the situation and met my neighbors where they were. So thank you.
All right, council members. Our next meeting will be Tuesday, July 7 at 2020 at 6 o'clock. This meeting is adjourned at 7:16.
Good night.